Is, and it is March 2nd. And this is our regular meeting for the Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District for the Board of Fire Commissioners. And with that, I will take us into a salute of the flag. And Chief Ray, will you lead us in the pledge? Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I feel so privileged this morning with my beautiful TM mask and my battle born. I feel, I feel really part of the fire team now. It's been, a little long, but it's all right. We finally got one. I know. Sorry, I'm sorry. All right, Madam Clerk, can I get a roll call, please?
Yes, sir. Bob Lucy, Chair.
Here.
Von Hartong, Vice Chair.
Here.
Alexis Hill.
Here.
Kitty Jung by phone.
Present.
Jeannie Herman.
Here.
Fire Chief Charles Moore.
Here.
Deputy District Attorney Mary Canderas. And I'm Kathy Smith, Chief Deputy Clerk. Sir, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Kathy. We do appreciate Madam Clerk. All right. Madam Clerk, do we have, Chief, we are on to item 3, public comment.
Mr. Chairman, item 3 is public comment. Comment heard under this item will be limited to 3 minutes per person and may pertain to matters both on and off the Board of Fire Commissioners' agenda. The district will also hear public comment during individual action items with comment limited to 3 minutes per person. Comments are to be made to the Board of Fire Commissioners as a whole.
All right. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll? Call for public comment. Thank you.
We have Mr. Cliff Lowe today, and he has provided a handout which we will pass out to you.
Thank you. Mr. Lowe. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. Good morning, Commissioners. For the record, Cliff Lowe, Washoe Valley. Why am I back here today, taking up your valuable time and some of mine as well? I'm here because I want to make sure that the record is clear regarding my public comment at the meeting 4 weeks ago. The minutes for that public comment say, he, referring to me, opined the most significant commitment at that station, referring to the future consolidated Washoe Valley station, was a staging area for a Regional Emergency Medical Services Authority unit. I've reviewed the video, it's clear. What I actually said was, the most significant of those is the staging of a REMSA unit at this location. 2 words make a world of difference. There's a big difference between a staging area, a place for a REMSA unit, and actually having a unit on the premises when it's not out on a call. Major difference. One of the other things that's been discussed for this station was a helipad. Now, I don't think anybody's going to confuse a helipad with an actual helicopter, nor am I suggesting that any commitment was made to have a helicopter station at the consolidated Washoe Valley station. But we should be clear, and I don't want to be part of any confusion because of the importance of this item. The commitment was for a REMSA unit to be staged there. Whether or not you choose to correct the minutes, it will now be part of the record. And of course, the important thing is to learn what is happening regarding this commitment and the other commitments that were made before we get too far along. It was in this room a year ago, plus that these various commitments were made. As you start to move forward towards construction planning, building of the station, I think it's appropriate to get an update. And on the next agenda item, one or any of you have the opportunity under Commissioner's requests for information to ask the Chief for an update. And I think that I'm confident that my fellow residents of Washoe Valley and Pleasant Valley are interested in hearing what's going on with these other items as you progress towards the consolidation of those stations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lowe. Are there any further public comment this morning? Do we have any via Zoom?
I don't see any.
Seeing none, we will close public comment and bring it back to the board. Chief, item 4.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Item 4 is Commissioners' Fire Chief's announcements, requests for information, topics for future agendas, and statements relating to items not on the agenda. No discussion among commissioners will take place on this item.
All right. Chief, do you have anything that you would like to lead off with?
Just briefly, Mr. Chairman, today is an open burn day, so if people are want to take advantage of burning their green waste, they may do so today. That information is always posted on our website, but today looks good. And then next month, we will be getting into a budget presentation, framing staff's recommendations broadly in April, and get the board's feedback on what staff believes its priorities are, and that will be next month.
Fantastic. All right. Commissioners, Vice Chairman, I have you signed in first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I again just want to thank the crew at Station 46 last night. They showed up almost immediately. It was a pretty wild accident on a residential street. It's unbelievable to me that this fellow was able to actually take out nearly 2 yards, not measurements, but a portion of one and a huge section of another. And we have really big lots out in Sky Ranch, and doing 25 miles an hour. So my sense is that there was no 25 miles an hour, but 46 showed up. They were on the scene very, very quickly, as usual. And, you know, the fellow was okay, but it's just one more reason why 46 is just so important to Spanish Springs. And so I want to thank everyone for all that they do. It's comforting, believe it or not, to know that, and I say believe it or not, it's comforting to have that station so close to my home, and it has been there for 30, well, as long as I've lived there, 34 years. Wasn't always 46. So again, thank you to that crew. That's why I asked if there was anyone from that crew here this morning. So, and that's all I have. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Vice Chairman. Commissioner Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would also like to say thank you for the work that your crews, Mr. Chief, did on Highway 431 at the structure fire. And I know that they had to close down the highway briefly, but containing that fire. And I know that's a major concern up in my district for, making sure that we're containing any potential fires, and access roads are really difficult up there. So thank you for the communication. I was able to get that out, and also the RGJ was right on that. So we were able to let folks know that the road was closed, and also that there would be delays, and then y'all got the road open and contained that fire. So thank you very much. I also have a question on whether I am not familiar with our fleet schedule, and when we buy new vehicles, what the rationale is for that, when we sell vehicles, and what the policies are on that. So I'd love to see that at the next meeting. So I'd have that information for the taxpayers. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Hill. Commissioner Jung, I have you signed in next.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. I also have a story of gratitude for first responders. I don't know if you heard yesterday, there was a fire under the Vine Street Bridge, and I consider the best bridge in town. And it was looked like a lived-in mobile home, but I don't think attached to a vehicle. And luckily nobody was in it, but it created a large enough fire that NDOT had to come out and make sure that the structure of the bridge was still intact. And thankfully, yes, it is intact. So I want to thank Reno Fire for that, and police were out there, of course, and NDOT. As the Vice Chairman said, there is something comforting that, there's somebody quickly to reply to something that's an emergency, of which I have zero competency to deal with. So it feels like a sigh of relief, and I totally get it, and I appreciate all of you who have chosen to go into the first responder profession, because as I always say, if something's on fire, every instinct in my body says to run the other way. So I know you have to override that, and I know it plays a toll too on you, but please do know we are so grateful and fortunate, and do feel it makes us sleep so much better at night. I can promise you that. And then finally, Mr. Chairman, this is a more global county-wide issue, is I wanted to thank Commissioner Hill for her opinion piece in the Reno Gazette-Journal explaining some misinformation and also her thinking behind some big issues that I believe we've moved more forward on than we have in the 13 and a half years I've been on the commission. So thank you so much. And I love the calling card at the end, which was, let's all work together and make this place the best it possibly can be. And I believe that's how this whole board believes. So I wanted to commend her on that and say that I thought that was really important, that we all start taking that space to explain things that are sometimes misinformation that then becomes truth, right? Because people say it enough times. So I really appreciate that. And then the March 1st proclamation for the Memorial Day for those that we've lost to COVID, I think is brilliant and something we need to embrace and roll some things out, because, you know, it's going to be a new Memorial Day that we unfortunately will have to revisit, you know, the deep loss that we are all feeling in this community and as a world. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Jung. I do appreciate that this morning. I do want to, I have some comments as well this morning, and I want to share those with you. First, a couple requests. Chief, I was up at the Silver Lake Fire Station previously, and is that where I believe that's where we do the green waste, one of our green waste programs, correct? And we have some of the slash piles there next to that. Can I get a kind of a report on when those are, if those are going to be burned or if those are going to be chipped and hauled off, and what's happening with those piles? We had just some questions on that. Another thing I want to bring up, and this is to Commissioner Hill's point, you know, we both represent portions of the Sierras that have people living in them, forested areas, and it can be challenging. I know I was talking to one of her constituents, and they had expressed to me that fire danger up in the basin is real, and the challenges that they have. And I think when we talk about these short-term rentals, that is a constant challenge we have up there. We were told there was an individual that was utilizing their home as a short-term rental, and they had renters in there, and the renter had, so that they could have a fire, they took a tire out into the front driveway, filled it with wood, and used it as a burn bin. So I can only imagine what that smelled like, or for the community. But this is the problem that we see, and especially in our forested areas. I mean, because they're beautiful and people want to visit them, but people are starting to improvise about what a burn barrel is, or where they should be doing burning, or if they can burn, they just make it up as they go along. And so, you know, I know we represent this side of the Sierras, and North Lake Tahoe works with us on that side. But it's something that we need to continue to talk about and make sure that whether we have short-term rentals in the Tahoe Basin or outside of the Tahoe Basin, what our burn codes are, and what you can do in your backyard, what you can't do in your backyard. A lot of people have, you know, we talk about open burning, but usually when we talk about open burning, we're thinking about burning ditches and burning, you know, waste around the house and different things like this. But there are people that come in here and just, hey, can I burn wood in my backyard, and what's that like? And can I use an outdoor chimney or an outdoor fireplace? And what are the standards that have to be, you know, adhered to in that? So those are just something that you know, when I had those conversations with that resident, it kind of threw me for a loop. But you know, people don't know necessarily unless you tell them exactly what they can and can't do. Now, you would think burning in a rubber tire would be not the smartest thing, but then again, there.
To let everybody know.
Yeah, well, you know, make sure the smoke was good, and you know, they were keeping the bugs away. Interesting stuff, and absolutely, I would agree with Commissioner Hill. Wonderful response by our team to the Mount Rose Highway on Wednesday. That was tremendous in regards to that response, and kids are up there, parents are utilizing that, and it wasn't, was it when was it Wednesday or Sunday? Friday? My goodness, my days are all messed up. Friday, but anyways, I mean, but to see the way we were able to, mobilize, get the water trucks up there, get the tanks out, that was really neat. And I mean, it just shows the efficacy, and that's a hard place to get to. That is not something that is a quick response time, but to get that amount of truck and that amount of hardware up there in that short of time and put that structure out was huge. And we're lucky it was in the winter time. And I'd like to find out kind of more details about the house, whether it was abandoned and stuff like, so hopefully you can bring that back for some future information. But those were just some of the things that I wanted to share. I would like to have an update brought back in regards to where we are with discussions on the consolidated stations down there, what the plans are, have some discussions with REMSA and potentially Sheriff's Office, and have that be provided as an update to everybody as what the intents are and what the discussions were when we originally had made those, not necessarily promises, but we had discussed a lot of those options with the community. So I want to bring that back for a future meeting for an update before we move forward with any true planning and hard stuff with that. And before I move forward, can I get Commissioner Jung's call dropped? So we're going to need to call her back and get her back on. So we get her back before we move forward here. Anything further from any of the commissioners that they'd like in regards to that? All right?
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
With respect to the Mount Rose Highway incident, we had a letter that questioned the ownership and that it may be the city of Reno. And my response to that is, from my perspective, and I think the board, and we can bring this back.
Ooh, Kitty.
Okay.
You getting something?
And now,
Oh, good.
darn it, felt like I was in the stadium. Good. More.
Okay, all right. Keep going.
Sorry.
We'll never get done.
So there was a question as to whether or not, as far as the ownership is concerned. And from my perspective, I don't care who owns a piece of property in our jurisdiction. We're going to show up. We're going to take care of the issue. It's just that simple. And I believe that any of the agencies would feel the same way. We have multiple properties in other jurisdictions other than just unincorporated Washoe County, and it's the fire service is impeccable,
Yeah.
regardless of where we are, whether it's the city of Reno or the city of Sparks. So, and I don't know whether anybody else got that comment, but it was a little unusual for me.
It's a lot of people believe, obviously Commissioner Hill's district and my district are divided by the Mount Rose Highway until you get to the summit. But the only piece of property that is owned up on that hill is the Sky Tavern piece of property, which is owned and operated by the city of Reno. And so there's also confusion about who lies where and what happens. And I know in Commissioner Herman's district, there's a lot of confusion about that, especially in Cold Springs. We've got a station that resides on City of Reno property and has to be responded to by a station out of Stead, but yet we have our property that we have on our station in Cold Springs has to go over and respond to Red Rock. And so there's some discussions there. And so as we have this discussion, maybe this kind of kicks something off for me, as we have this further discussion about consolidated stations and what we're making sure that we have equity amongst the battalions, north and south, what we're going to be doing, to improve that fire service. If we're going to consolidate, the intent of consolidating the Southern Battalion and making sure that those stations are more effective and respond better. If we're going to be moving stations up there, what are we going to be doing for stations up north? Are we really looking at improving? Because that's more important to me I mean, not necessarily, it's not more important. I think it's important that we still have effective stations everywhere, but that if we're moving battalions up, that we have an effective station up there and where those response times are. So maybe a report on Commissioner Herman's district, where her and Commissioner Hartung's district would best be responded by improved service up there. I know we talked about that in years past, but I think it's time and probably prudent now that we continue to see growth in those communities, and we keep talking about it. Now it's a reality, and with all the wildfires we've seen, I think it's time that we start having that conversation event about having that capital improvements and some different discussions up there. So, shake anything loose for anybody? All right. No. All right. So we'll close item 4. Chief, we are on to our consent agenda, item 5.
Mr. Chairman, item 5 is consent items, items A through H. If there's any questions of the board, I'd be glad to
Anything
have
that
staff answer.
anything that we need to pull at this time, or is it ready as posted? Commissioners, do you have anything that you want to change, pull out? All right, at this time, looking for a motion.
So moved.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion by Vice Chair Hartung, second by Commissioner Hill. All those in the call for the vote, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, motion carries unanimously. All right, we are on to item 6. Chief.
Item 6 is the recommendation to adopt a resolution of intent to issue bonds. I'll read the entire subject line into the record. We do have John Peterson on the line and our bond counsel, Kendra Follett from Sherman and Howard, to give the presentation via Zoom.
Great.
But this is a recommendation to adopt a resolution of intent proposing the issuance of and authorizing the publication of notices relating to general obligation, limited tax, capital improvement bonds additionally secured by pledged revenues, and the maximum principal amount of $7 million, to finance the acquisition of properties for stations and administration authorized by NRS 474.511, including fixtures, structures, stations, other buildings and sites therefore, and appurtenances and incidentals necessary, useful, or desirable for any such facilities, including all types of property therefore, and providing the effective date hereof. The proposal to issue these bonds was approved by the Washoe County Debt Management Commission per NRS 350.014 on February 19th, 2021.
All right.
And if, Mr. Peterson, if you're on Zoom, I'm going to let you take it away.
Oh, there you go.
Thank you. Sorry.
Go ahead.
For the record, John Peterson with J&A Consulting Group. And yeah, would just like to follow up with a few items based on Chief Moore's presentation. This really is the next step as we move forward through this bond authorization process. As he mentioned, we received unanimous approval by the Debt Management Commission on February 19th. And I have to say it was a really good meeting with the Debt Commission, a lot of good questions, a lot of discussion about this proposed debt. And assuming that we approve this resolution of intent this morning, our next items will be to publish that resolution in the paper, which kicks off the 90-day waiting period that's required in statute. And as we're going through that 90-day period, we will be working to complete the other bond authorization steps. One of those items is a public hearing, which we anticipate will be held at the meeting in May. And then finally, once that 90-day period is completed, would bring this back for a final approval by the board at the meeting in June. And that final resolution, that's our plan right now. Obviously, that can change depending on where we are. In terms of interest rates, since we first talked at the meeting last month, I'm sure it's no secret that interest rates have increased since we made that presentation at the beginning of February. However, we're still expecting that we're within the 3.35 estimated interest rate that was presented at that meeting. So we're still within our estimates, but we'll keep a close eye on that. Moving forward, We're anticipating that the annual debt service on this is approximately $416,000 per year, and that that debt service will be repaid over a 25-year period. Attached to the packet for today's meeting is actually the detailed information that we presented to the Debt Management Commission, and I'll pause here and see if there are any specific questions about that information that was presented to the Debt Commission. Otherwise, would just say that basically that encapsulates the necessary criteria that the Debt Commission has to use in order to either approve or deny a request. And again, they approved it unanimously.
Mr. Peterson, I do have a question for you. In regards to the interest rate, as you pointed out, they are increasing. We're seeing that day by day. How soon can we, I know we have the 90-day posting period. When can you lock those rates?
So in order to lock the rates, we need to complete the 90-day period, and the bond resolution needs to be approved by the Board of Commissioners. And that bond resolution is scheduled for the meeting in June, which is right at the very end of that 90-day period. So really that's the time frame that we're talking about is early part or middle of June when we would lock in rates. And I'll just point out that the increase that we saw in rates today, I think really has to do with, one, we sell tax exempt bonds, and we saw an increase in taxable rates, U.S. Treasuries, at the beginning of February. And so while tax exempt rates at that point did not increase. And so a lot of that rate increase the last 2 weeks really was just tax exempt bonds catching up to where U.S. Treasuries had already gone. But also, I think there is just some question as we look at federal stimulus and just the Federal Reserve's ability to control inflation as we move forward. I don't think anyone anticipates that inflation is going to, all of a sudden become a problem in the next 3 months. But I think they're more looking at this long term and asking that question about, where will inflation be relative to the Fed's target? And so that's what we saw with those rate increases. But that's kind of a long-winded answer to say that we have to wait 3 months.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Any other questions for Mr. Peterson? Vice Chairman.
My question is, it's probably for the chief. So Chief, $416,000 a year works out to about $34,600, call it $700 a month. Are those payments made monthly, or is it quarterly, or is it one lump sum yearly?
I'll look to Cindy Vance, but I believe we pay those monthly.
Monthly?
Quarterly?
Quarterly?
This is John Peterson. Maybe I'll handle this. Generally, the bond payments are made semi-annually, twice a year.
Twice a year.
So we would have interest payments due twice a year, and our principal payment would be due at the end of the fiscal year. So generally, we'd make an interest payment in December, also an interest payment in June, and then our principal would be due June.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Wrong on both guesses.
I did not know.
Well, you got to, it only happens once to you guys, I know. All right, so we are, Mr. Peterson, any further discussion or presentation you need to give, or Ms. Follett, do you have anything you'd like to add?
No further presentation from me other than just would recommend approval of this so that we can move forward with this process.
Great. All right, commissioners.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I move to adopt a resolution of intent proposing the issuance of and authorizing the publication of notices relating to general obligation, or in paren, limited tax capital improvement bonds, in paren, additionally secured by pledged revenues, in the maximum principal amount of $7 million to finance the acquisition of properties for stations and administration authorized by NRS 474.511, including fixtures, structures, stations, and other buildings and sites therefore and appurtenances and incidentals necessary, useful, or desirable for any such facilities, including all types of property, therefore and providing the effective date hereof. The proposal to the issuance of these bonds was approved by the Washoe County Debt Management Commission per NRS 350.014 sequestered on February 19th, 2021.
All right, I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Herman.
Chair Lucy,
Yes,
we didn't have anybody signed in
I was just about to go to you.
for
but
public
this-
comment. Okay.
I appreciate it. You beat me there. So we have no public comment, so nobody signed in, and I don't believe we have anybody signed in via Zoom. So we will bring it back to the board. I have a motion from the vice chairman, a second from Commissioner Herman. I'll call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed?
I don't have it up on my
Motion
screen.
carries unanimous. Hold on just 1 second. It's
No,
coming.
no, I'm talking, oh, here we go, here we go.
There you go.
Good.
Please place your votes on the screen and affirm your votes. Motion carries unanimously with all commissioners voting. All right, so, thank you, everybody. I appreciate it. Mr. Peterson, Mr. Follett, thank you so much for your presentation today. We look forward to talking to you back in June when we can move forward. All right, item 7, Chief.
Item 7, I don't believe anybody is here from Local 2487, so we will
Alright.
table that.
All right, we'll table that for today, and we'll bring that back at hopefully next month. All right, this is the fun part. We are on to item 8, Chief.
This is the fun part. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have promotional announcements and introduction of new employees. I'll call on Chief Kikulis and Chief Kettering to make the presentations and introduce our proud members of promotion and new employment.
Good morning, Commissioners. Good morning, Chief Moore. For the record, Chris Kettering, Division Chief, Truckee, Meadows Fire. So today we're going to introduce one of our newly hired firefighter paramedics, and then we'll go through and do the announcements for the promotions for captain and engineer. So firefighter Andy Mann, will you please come forward? The short guy. And your wife. Sorry. Andy Mann has been in the fire service for 6 years, working both for Truckee Meadows Fire and Sparks Fire. He started his career in 2012 as a paramedic with REMSA. Firefighter Mann recently completed our lateral hire academy, and he is now assigned to Commissioner Hartong's district at Station 46. Firefighter Mann's wife, Chrissy, will be pinning him today. Go ahead.
Welcome, Andy. Or should I say firefighter man?
Captain David Kearns and his wife, Lynn, please. Captain Kearns has been in the fire service for about 20 years. He started with the organization in 2012 as an engineer. He's part of our regional hazmat team, which he's been there for 9 years. Captain Kearns has assisted with developing and implementing the district's inventory program, known as Check It. He is currently assigned to Commissioner Lucy's district at Station 32. His wife, Lynn, will go ahead and pin him.
Congratulations.
Captain Scott Finley and his wife, Natalie. Captain Finley has 16 years in the fire service. He started with the organization as a firefighter EMT advanced in 2012. He promoted to engineer in 2014. He's one of our leads for our SCBA program. He's also a member of our WET team. Captain Finley is currently assigned to Commissioner Herman's district in Station 42. His wife, Natalie, will pin him.
Congratulations, Captain Finley.
Captain Eric Olson and his wife, Lauren. Captain Olson's been in the fire service for 12 years, promoting to engineer in 2012 and then to captain. He's part of our EMS Quality Assurance Committee. Captain Olson is currently assigned to Commissioner Lucy's district at Station 30. His wife Lauren will pin him.
Congratulations.
What's that? We're going to move on to our engineer promotions. Engineer Gary Garrett, would please come forward. And his daughter Mackenzie will be pinning him today. Engineer Garrett has 28 years in the fire service. Started with our organization in 2016 as a firefighter paramedic before promoting to engineer. He's a hazmat tech on our regional hazmat team, as well as a tox medic on the hazmat team. Engineer Garrett has assisted the agency. He has really good photography skills. So he's taken pictures of stations and personnel and provided that to the district for us. Engineer Garrett is currently assigned to Commissioner Hartung's district, Station 46. Mackenzie, go ahead.
Congratulations, Engineer Garrett.
Engineer Jake Jacob. Engineer Jacob's been in the fire service for 12 years, starting with the organization in 2012 as a firefighter paramedic before promoting to engineer. He's a member of our regional hazmat team and our wet team. He's a member of both our EMS and best practices committee, and he's going to be assigned to Commissioner Lucy's district at Station 32. Engineer Jacob's fiancee Megan will be pinning him today.
Congratulations.
Engineer Travis Johnson. Engineer Johnson's been in the fire service for 9 years, serving as a firefighter paramedic with the organization since 2012. He's a member of our regional hazmat team, our PPE, and apparatus committee. He also assisted with the buildup and implementation of our first ladder truck. He is currently assigned to Commissioner Hartung's district, Station 46. Engineer Johnson's son, Ethan, along with his father, Greg Johnson, who's a retired fire engineer from the city of Reno, will be pinning him today.
Yeah. Congratulations.
Before TJ leaves, his son is at the beginning of a legacy here with his father, himself, and also his mother. So I was gonna let TJ go ahead and badge his son and get a helmet
yeah, I
on
like
before
that.
he sneaks over and becomes a police officer.
Succession planning, I like it, Kettering. Yeah.
And last but not least, Engineer Ed Martin. Ed's been in the fire service for 16 years. He started with our organization in 2016 as a firefighter paramedic before promoting to engineer. He's assisted with providing EMS and fire mentoring to our newly hired firefighter paramedics. He's going to be assigned to Commissioner Lucy's district at Station 30. Engineer Martin's wife, Brandy, will be pinning him today.
Congratulations.
Thank you, Commissioners. Chief Moore, that concludes our promotions, unless you have any questions.
Thank you, Chief Keatring, Chief Cookless, and Chief Moore. You know, once again, we want to thank not only all of our staff that work tirelessly to continue to evolve and continue to grow within our organization. It's because of you that we can continue to provide the level of service that we do across the unincorporated area of Washoe County. But we also, at this time, like to thank the families, because we know the commitments that you have to make to allowing your spouses and partners to come and participate in such a needed service within our community. So big round of applause, not only for our staff, but for you as well. Thank you very much. All right, Chief. All right, let's move on to item 9, sir.
Item 9 is the chief's report. I thought I would just mention the structure fire that we had on last Friday continues to smolder and steam a little bit, so I want the public to know that they should not be alarmed if they see that occurring. It's likely to happen continue to occur for the next 5 days. The fall down is so deep, maybe 5 feet at a minimum, even more than that, even though we used a track hoe to pull the debris out. It's just the nature of buildings like that collapse on themselves, that they will continue to steam. So we are checking it daily. No reason to be concerned. There's a lot of snow around, so I do want to let the board know and the citizens know that they can expect to see steam and or smoke coming from the structure fire site for a few more days.
Awesome.
And then with all these promotions, then who replaces them? I would need to announce that we've got a new member academy starting with 11 new members who will start their academy very, very soon, and hopefully they'll be on the line sometime around late July. And as soon as they graduate, we'll certainly bring them by for an introduction.
Fantastic.
Item A1 is the renewal of the cooperative agreement between TMFR and the City of Reno for automatic and mutual aid. Chief Kukulis has been engaged with his counterpart at the City of Reno, and I've certainly talked to Chief Cochran about the renewal. I believe we're in agreement that we want to renew the agreement. We have talked to them about expanding, though, the areas where automatic aid occurs. And I know this is sometimes hard for the layman to understand the differences between automatic aid and mutual aid, so if I can just take a moment to explain it. Mutual aid is when we get on the scene of an incident and we realize that we're going to need more help. We will make a manual call for more help through dispatch to Washoe County Dispatch, who calls either Sparks Dispatch or Reno Dispatch or whoever would dispatch the resources that we would need. So it's a manual process. An automatic aid process is one that's already built into the dispatch protocols. So when we get a 911 call for a structure fire, say in an area that we may be closer to, but it may be in another jurisdiction's area, automatic aid means that we would respond as first due, closest, as well as the other jurisdictions potentially. And vice versa. So when the City of Reno or City of Sparks might be closer to one of our constituents, they get dispatched at the same time as we do, and so we make a joint response to that incident. There's a little bit of a nuance between what happens with TM and the City of Sparks. We call that enhanced automatic aid, where one jurisdiction responds because they're closer, and the jurisdiction having authority does not respond. So in some cases where there's low acuity medical calls or even a high acuity medical call where we only need one resource, we don't send 2 resources, we just send one. And we answer the call for the City of Sparks as if it were our own. And Sparks would answer the call for TM they would just assume that it's their own call. They write the report and that's embedded in their records. It works a little differently with the City of Reno in that we will do a dual dispatch right now because our automatic aid is limited to structure fires only. And I believe brush fires also is in that component. I've asked Chief Cochran if we would like to consider adding high acuity, high level medical emergencies to that protocol. And so if you endorse this, we will start talking to the city of Reno about making plans to where if there's a heart attack, maybe a quarter mile away from one of our stations, TM would be dispatched as well as the city of Reno. And what that does is it gets an emergency responder, an emergency paramedic on the scene in the fastest possible way. So right now, the protocol is not set up to do that, but the CAD system are at end of life, and over the next 2 years, a new CAD system is going to come online. And so we should make these decisions right now, I believe, so that we can program those automatic aid protocols, assuming that we're in agreement. Program that in so when we do flip the switch on the new CAD system, we're all set and ready to go. Then I believe the next step following this will then be to implement AVL if we can get agreement, so that we're not having to go through a very complex system of programming fire response zones, drawing polygons around the areas that we are potentially first due for Reno and where Reno is potentially first due for us. AVL will simply show our location and the city of Reno's location on a screen, and the computer will recommend the closest unit to go to that emergency call. That's still a few years away, but nevertheless, we're still working on getting towards that system. I think one thing before we go full-blown into EMS automatic aid would be to understand how many calls that would add to our system and to what stations. And the same for the city of Reno. We did this many, many years ago, but it's probably timely that we study that again. So with your permission, I'll ask the city of Reno for their CAD data, and we'll share our CAD data with the city and do an analysis to see that if we add EMS calls to the automatic aid protocol, here's how many additional calls it will add to our crews and vice versa. So I think that's a piece of information the board should understand. I think it's more likely to hit Station 40 in Mogul, certainly Station 44 instead, Station 33 in the south, and those are probably the three big ones that would be impacted. So I've shown you some maps on what we've proposed with the city of the areas that we want to add to where Reno would respond for us, and we would respond for Reno, and it expands the coverage area quite a bit. So simply that is it. We'll be working on that in the next 5, 6, 7 months and try to get that set up and bring you back a revised agreement, hopefully before the expiration, but I think that's certainly doable to bring that back to you before June.
Great. Chief, some of the commissioners do have questions. So Commissioner Jung has a question, so I'll go to her first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Fire Chief, holding all things constant or de minimis in terms of the staffing and financial impact, if we could hold that as steady as possible, my one question for you when it comes to this mutual and auto aid, what is the best practice?
Well, best practice, I think, is AVL. That's certainly the model in southern Nevada. And there's boundary drops all across the metro area, including Henderson, Clark County, City of Las Vegas, and City of North Las Vegas. So I believe best practice is AVL.
Okay. So what I wanted that on the record because I think even somebody not expert in emergency services would agree with what the chairman had said earlier, and chairman in the commission announcements and things for future discussion is that the bottom line is, as long as one agency isn't subsidizing the other too much, right, because it's never going to be completely across the board fair, the public expectation and best practice is that AVL is always the way to do it if we can do it fairly, justly, and in as much as it's not de minimis. So I'm glad that what I'm trying to say is that's a great argument as the chair laid out. to always go back to what is best for the citizens. So I'm kind of making the record for the board right now. And then, Mr. Fire Chief, I would urge you and encourage you to, if this gets to be at the level of policy, which it will have to, is to use your Board of Fire Commissioners to help you explain or negotiate in as best as you see fit, not as I see fit, but how you have understood, or call some of your commissioners for strategy or insight, because I think we can get a lot further if we can obviously convince each other that we're all in this for what's the greater good, rather than a boundary and an arms race over the annexation issue. So what I'm saying is I support this. I think it's I know it's best practice, and now I've had a fire expert say it on the record. And whatever we can do to help, I know for sure I'm behind you, and I heard the chair say that too. So that's all that I have, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Chairman, I know you had some questions as well.
More comments than anything, and Chief, and I couldn't agree more. Auto aid is extremely important. Nobody cares who shows up. They just care that somebody shows up. And so I know that there's been some question of how this should work in the past between the agencies, but from my perspective, and we've seen this in the past, there have been life-threatening issues where people were lost quite a number of years ago. And there's just no need for that, especially when we have resources that are close by that could render aid. So from my perspective, and notwithstanding AVL, AVL is going to be that's the obviously the best path forward, where it doesn't, in AVL, to my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, an engine could be driving by, going back from a call, and they're close enough, they could be, a quarter block away, and they would respond, because we know where each one of those pieces of apparatus are and what the capabilities are. So from my perspective, look, I mean, if I'm having a heart attack and I don't care where I am, I want somebody to show up. And I think every single citizen in Washoe County deserves that. So I say let's move forward, whatever we have to do to support you with getting those agreements crafted. We need to understand that these are agreements between jurisdictions, and let's treat them as such, agreements between jurisdictions. And I agree with Commissioner Jung. You don't want things that are upside down, but at the end of the day, sometimes that's just going to happen. And if it does, if it gets too far upside down, we just have some off-ramp, and not an off-ramp to stop the service, but a way to true the system up. That's all. You just go through a true-up every, and maybe it's every 2 years. Maybe it's not every year, because it can take some time to true things up, from my perspective. When you look at the longer-term view of these things, I think the wave is actually, it doesn't have a lot of spikes in it. It's actually a lot smoother than we might begin to imagine. So, because I've noticed that in Spanish Springs, where 1 month we'll respond quite a number of times for the city of Sparks, but then 2 months later, they responded far more than we have for them. So the system kind of trues itself up naturally.
Agreed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Sitting here with both the Vice Chair and Commissioner Jung and all the commissioners, and listening to these comments, this is that first step. I've said it from this dais, and whether popular or not, this is how we grow. This is how we grow into the big county that we are, and we start departing from the old ways and some more of the primitive ways of thinking. AVL is absolutely the way we should be doing this and moving forward. But if the first step is signing an agreement to introduce automatic aid and increase our EMS response, I mean, I've seen it many a time at for Station 33, which was the old Virginia station, right next to Station 12. How often did we have accidents that were right in front of the old station, that we couldn't even leave to do anything for. Could have been there in 5 minutes if we 2 minutes if we walked. And the point is that, and put this on the record for me, Chief. For example, if there is an accident for, let's say, on Mount Rose Highway, on 431, right in front of the Rayleigh Shopping Center, my understanding that half of that is the city of Reno, and they get dispatched to that. However, 36, which is on Arrow Creek, runtime could probably be maybe 5 minutes, and I've driven it, and I drive pretty fast, and I can get there. From 12 to get there, you're probably 8, 9, 10, and that's if they're in station. Same, and we also have 33, we have 39, we have a number of stations, more stations right there at that location, yet how often do you think Reno dispatches stations, if 12's not in station or on a call, that they have to dispatch all the way from 3, and you've told me this, I think. They've dispatched from Station 3, which is off of Moana, to Mount Rose Highway, is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. And see, and this is the kind of insanity that we continue to live in, is that we are defining fire service and life-saving initiatives based upon some kind of boundary, some map that, was designed in GIS. This is not, one versus the other. And I know that there's the argument that goes on that it's, we can't agree with, the city of Reno and the local unions. And I know there's constant fight, and it's kind of that over-looming cloud out there that we can't, but this is about life safety. And I know Commissioner Jung, when she sat as chair, one of my first years on this board, we try to have that discussion about how do we continue to move forward and how do we work for life safety. And I think this is those discussions that we keep having. And I see Reno Ice, I see these little kids going down to Reno Ice to skate, and they're they're walking across from maybe the apartment next door. They get hurt on the road, that's a Reno call. But if they get hurt in our parking lot, it's a TM call. I mean, it's the insanity of that is just beyond me. So, I know that we're dragging this out, and this is probably not what we need to be doing at this point in time, but absolutely, I support this. I think this is smart, not only for my district, but Commissioner Herman's district. Just driving up into Cold Springs and seeing the issues in Cold Springs with Red Rock and Lemon Valley instead, and our North Battalion being as strained as it is, and Reno's resources being as strained as it is up there, we need to start having these discussions. And even if it's difficult to have, even if it's like this challenge of power, it's not about power. It shouldn't be about power. It should never be about power. It should be about who can do the best job for the people that pay the taxes, and making sure that people stay safe. And I get that our tax structure is different in the city of Reno's and the city of Sparks, but gosh darn it, that's our jobs, the 5 of us that sit up here to talk to the other people at both of our municipalities, to our colleagues, and start having those conversations and making sure that our chiefs are having those conversations, because the longer we keep talking about this and signing agreements every 2 years to do this, not moving forward, we're not growing, we're not becoming who we should be as a community. So those are my comments, Mr. Chief. I know you
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yeah.
There's a fine line, I think, between discussing the announcements and then maybe perhaps moving towards some kind of consensus. So I just bring that to the board's attention. If you want to discuss in more detail, I think we should set an agenda item. And otherwise, I think the chief, the DCs can bring an item to the board for their approval with some of these comments in mind.
I appreciate that, Madam District Attorney. We will definitely bring those comments. I think that this is a prudent time to start, as Chief pointed out, and so I will bring that back at Commissioner Manager's announcements later on the agenda, and actually make that formally as a request. That was not for deliberation, that was more for a commentary. But I think everybody gets my point very clearly. So Chief, I have you signed in to add or continue on with your report, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to address Commissioner Jung's point of how the board could help. I think the next logical step after AVL is fully implemented, then why not start discussing a regional system? And I know that that's very, very complicated, and that there's all kinds of tough issues to discuss on that, but in my conversations with Chief Cochran, I have said that if we're ever going to get there, it needs to be at a step at a time. You can't always throw a touchdown pass on the first play. But these are steps that will eventually lead, I believe, and maybe it's going to take a long time, I don't know, but it will eventually lead to a system that works very, very well. What that looks like, what that regional system works like, I have no idea. It could still be 3 separate jurisdictions being in charge of their own service level, or it could be a full-on regional fire district. But I think this is a great place to start, and thank you for the encouragement to proceed on this issue.
Chief, and I would, we talk about the 3 municipalities in the fire district, but we also need to talk about REMSA, as they are a major player in regards to our emergency, all of our transport for all of our EMS calls. And when we talk about transport for our EMS calls, but being that at 85% or 90% of our calls could be EMS given year to year, those are discussions that they need to be part of as well. So, not deliberating, just adding to the discussion, but I think you're right. So, all right, Chief.
I'll move on to item A2. I wanted to mention that the pile burning project in Galena was really NDF's baby, but we provided resources to assist them in getting all these piles burned. So I sensed some angst on the part of the board in doing this pile burn last month, but nevertheless, it was done safely. We burned between 140 and 160 piles, with about 20 piles left in Maryland's Pond. And as soon as the snow level starts to drop, then we'll finish those off and the project will be completed. And then finally, we want to thank NV Energy for financing a track chipper. We're doing lots of fuels projects for NV Energy, and this piece of equipment is going to make us a lot more efficient in our fuels crew, such that we can drive it along the pathway of where we're clearing, rather than having to drag the fuels out to a truck and then ship them on the road. So this is going to really increase the speed of which we're able to do fuels projects. And then finally, an update on capital projects. At the last meeting, I could tell that I was moving a little too fast on capital projects, and the board was not comfortable moving that quickly. So it is my intent to go back to Washoe County capital projects, ask them for more help, and then bring back a comprehensive recommendations and options for the board to consider in April. It is staff's intent to recommend 3 capital projects, planning at least, if not construction, for the next fiscal year. One of those, of course, is Station 37, which we've been working on now for almost 2 years. And I've heard the board want more information of how we pick the design team, how we deliver the product, whether it's TMER, whether it's design, bid, build. So we will review all of those projects prior to the budget. So Station 37, the improvements at Barron Way, and the consolidated station in Washoe Valley is what staff has in mind to bring to you in that presentation. And then we want to review the options for the design team selection. The design team could be TMER, it could be selecting an architect and doing design, bid, build, or it can be selecting a contractor to do design, build. All 3 of those options have implications for cost and quality, but nevertheless, I think the board needs to understand what its options are. I'm still a little nervous about construction costs, because everybody in the industry is telling me that they're high. And I think the board understands that we have to agree to prevailing wage, which certainly ups the cost of labor in our projects. So that's a lot different than, say, somebody in the private sector who is not bound by that restriction. So come April, we'll bring back you a comprehensive presentation and recommendations, and that's certainly timely as we enter into discussions about the budget for the next fiscal year.
All right. Any questions for Chief in regards to any of the other items? Okay. Thank you, Chief. Do appreciate that, those updates. All right, we are on to item 10.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Item 10 is a recommendation to authorize the district to purchase extrication equipment needed to provide standardized equipment for the newest Type 1 structure engines from Ellen Kernis in the amount of $210,084 pursuant to NRS 332.115B, exemptions to requirements for competitive bidding.
All right. Any questions or comments on the item 10 from the commissioners? Do we have any public comment?
I don't see any.
Seeing no public comment, we'll bring it back to the board. Looking for a motion at this time.
So moved.
A motion from Vice Chairman. Do I have a second? Second from Commissioner Herman. I have a motion and a second. Seeing no further comment, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously with all commissioners voting. Please affirm your votes on your screens. And there we go. We have all commissioners voting. Motion carries unanimously. Chief, item 11.
Item 11, and I'll paraphrase, Mr. Chairman, this is a recommendation to purchase 4 new command vehicles from the Capital Ford of Carson City in the amount of $48,748.80 each. These vehicles are intended to be command vehicles for battalion chiefs and/or division chiefs as my staff figures out who needs to get what vehicle. But nevertheless, we're a little bit short of command vehicles right now, and this recommendation addresses that shortage.
Okay. All right, commissioners. Commissioner Hill, I have you signed in.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'm just curious why we need 4 trucks and they're so expensive, and I know trucks are expensive, but $48,000 a piece. Why command vehicles can't be cars, lower, gas use, and why, people can't trade off trucks. I'm just curious for the taxpayer to know, why trucks are needed.
Thank you for the question. Trucks are needed, particularly 3/4 ton and 4-wheel drive, because of the areas that we go primarily for wildland fire. We're going off-road a lot during the summer, and a sedan, simply won't do the job in that respect, nor carry the amount of equipment that each battalion chief needs to have in the back of his vehicle. So they need to be fairly rugged, and they need to have high ground clearance for the areas that we're going that aren't necessarily in the city grid. They're off-road.
Yeah, I guess when I see the fleet schedule and, the rationale for different vehicles that the department uses, I'll have a better understanding. But are all 4 always needed off-road at all times? Is that just, they couldn't trade off trucks or anything like that logistically?
They're not needed off-road at all times, but the weight that they carry certainly is not light between SCBAs and I don't know what you guys carry in your trucks, but there's quite a bit of equipment that we put into the back of the camper shells. And it's not unlike what the city of Reno drives, or city of Sparks, or even North Lake Tahoe. And matter of fact, it's pretty standard with all the regional departments in the area that we use a similar type of vehicle for command vehicles. So I hope I'm responsive to your question, but they need to be fairly rugged. They need to be diesel because we do put a lot of miles on them, and they do last 200,000 miles, where I think a sedan is just not going to do it for us.
Thank you, Commissioner Hill. Vice Chair Harton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And it says it right here, and I would like to note this, that this is a joinder contract with the state of Nevada, Chief. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah, so I'm sure that there's a savings with respect to the state's probably buying a dozen, maybe more. And so we're getting a much better fleet price, I'm sure.
By many thousands of dollars.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. That's what I thought. So
It's $3,400 per unit that we're saving. So,
12,000 total.
Okay.
13, in fact, it's 14,000 total. So, yeah, I'm supportive of this personally. There's no other questions, Mr. Chair. I'm ready to make a motion.
Okay. I see, I have no other questions from any of the commissioners, so at this time, is there any public comment signed in?
There is not.
All right, seeing no public comment on Zoom, we will go looking for a motion at this time.
So moved.
All right, I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by, motion by Commissioner Vice Chair Hartung, second by Commissioner Herman. Seeing no further discussion, I will call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed?
nay, I need more information, but
All
I
right.
look forward to getting it. Thank you.
Motion carries.
Chairman?
Commissioner Jung?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I am going to vote in the affirmative for this, but I want to echo Commissioner Hill's concerns. And I can tell you for myself, and it's not just the fire service, just because other people do it doesn't mean that's the best way to do things. And I know that there's a history and there's psychology behind all of this. That's why I will support this. But I do agree, some things everywhere around the county, as Mr. Chairman said, they need to change, and it's probably going to be with us. But I do support this, and it's something that we can look at going into the future of some standards and practices that might be a little different from the rest of the municipalities, but that are best for us. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner Jung. And I want to make sure that everybody understands, I support my commission and everything that they do. We do things very, very much the same as everybody, but we also do many innovative things here. And so I don't think there's ever a bad way to look at things. So we can always evolve and do different things different. So we'll keep this on our plate and see how we can make this more effective in a better district, a more innovative district. But it doesn't mean that we have to sacrifice service for that. So at this time, the motion carries with all commissioners voting for in the affirmative, one in the opposition. So the motion carries. We are on to item 12, Chief.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Item 12 is discussion and possible approval of the annual evaluation process for the fire chief, including questions and a proposed list of evaluators, and a possible discussion of goals and objectives for next year's review. The results of the evaluation will be presented on the April 6th regular meeting. So staff recommends that we follow the process that was similar to the county manager's process, where we've identified different groups of evaluators. Group 1, the commissioners. Group 2, my direct reports. Group 3, internal stakeholders, and Group 4, external stakeholders. And develop the questions along the lines that were just very similar to Manager Brown. This could certainly be amended by you if you'd like. You can add or subtract questions and evaluators, whatever your desires would be. But we will get this out within the next week and bring you back the results.
Thank you, Chief. I'm going to make a few comments. Chief and I have worked on this. Obviously, I've worked on this with staff for the last year. It was very successful with the managers and this kind of different way that we've done it than years past. I feel that the type of reviews and comments that we've received from the evaluators have been strong and prudent, and have truly gave the manager clear and concise direction about his performance and how they moved through it, even in the pandemic year. So I think this is probably one of the best suited ways to move forward. As you can see within the staff report, there is a recommended names of those that would be participating in the evaluation. So I feel fairly confident that this is a very robust group of individuals to provide that kind of feedback. But at this time, I want to make sure that if there are any comments from the commission, that we can get those on record now. So with that, I'll turn this over to the commission. Vice Chairman, I have you signed in first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'm supportive of having a consistent process. I think it's a good way to go, and I think that you've done a good job with setting this up, and again, I like the consistency from our manager to the chief, which, for all intents and purposes, are only 2 employees. So I like that consistency between our 2 employees, and there's no surprises, and there's no reason to evaluate one way and the other another way. So I'm very supportive of this. Thank you,
All right.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Hill, I have you signed in next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was not here for Manager Brown's review, and so I was just curious, and I really love that you're doing these fire commissioners, direct reports, internal stakeholders, and external stakeholders. That's really awesome to make sure we're getting a variety of inputs, because we're not doing the day-to-day as fire commissioners. We want to make sure that our chief is responsive to the community. But for external stakeholders, did we do any other folks from the community for Manager Brown, or did we use the same external stakeholders that are listed here?
We used different externals for Manager Brown
Okay.
because individuals that he would interact with on a day-to-day basis. So we tried to close it down to what, based upon the chief's expectations and what's drafted in his contract. That's why we drafted it after those people that he would interact with.
Okay. Just seems like a lot of Washoe County folks, and I was just curious if we ever did people kind of in the community that the chief interacts with, and maybe the chief doesn't interact with. I was just curious.
Yeah, the only other people that we could potentially do, I mean, obviously chief does talk to, hopefully talks to more people than's on this list, but I mean, I think he does. But that ones that would be prudent to the actual evaluation, that would truly know his scope of work and what he does, outside of probably the fire chief at the lake, which would be Chief Summers, thank you, Chief Ryan Summers, or maybe past chiefs in the there really isn't that many people, but for a day-to-day basis, these are the individuals that chief works with.
Yes, and I'm still learning, so if this is the best list, but I really appreciate that you've brought in all the different groups to make sure that we're getting the best read on how our chief is performing in the community.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it is. I mean, truly, and this goes from what Commissioner Jung had proposed many years ago, that we do truly a 360 performance evaluation, something that really truly encompasses the chief's contract and his scope of work, and really where he lives within. And evidently, and one of the ways that we felt that would be accomplished is getting feedback from many different areas, such as commissioners, we only interact with him in a board setting or in an executive setting. Different than his operations would, different than external stakeholders would. And so actually the questions that are curtailed and the way they're weighted are completely different, and you'll have the access to those questions and that when that is completed. All right, seeing anything further from the commissioners? Commissioner Jung, do you have anything you'd like to add at this time?
Yes, and my first question is, when will these be distributed?
Within about a week, Commissioner Jung.
Okay, so if Commissioner Hill has somebody in particular she'd like to be on there, I'm sure it wouldn't be a problem, but I will caveat that with maybe it's a formal practice, probably should be, it's an informal practice. We do allow the person who's being evaluated to, let me say it this way. We are very empathetic to the vagaries of human interaction, and that active conflict with somebody that person should not be the evaluator. And this is a boring history lesson, but remember, when Chief Moore came in, it was a very bitter deconsolidation. or interlocal. We were never consolidated. We had an interlocal agreement. So we definitely want to take into consideration that somebody can be truly objective and not carrying over any conflict that may have occurred. And I will say for the record, I did not evaluate a chief executive because of a conflict. And that's because this board really wants objective feedback and not access to grind political issues or just, the normal things that when feelings get hurt. So I think that Alexis Hill, Miss Commissioner Hill, you probably should talk a little bit more with the fire chief so that your issues can be addressed, because if there's people on there that you think should be on there and they're not, and we probably shouldn't discuss it in a public forum because it's embarrassing, to kind of just get your arms around that, because we really do hold this as a sacred space that is to be informing us on the objective perception in as much as we can be objective and not retaliatory. So those are my comments. I think it's great, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for putting in the work. I know these are difficult to get your arms around, and most importantly, by contract, we have to do this, and it really is an opportunity for the chief to figure out where we can help him be successful more. That's the way I look at it with Mr. Brown and my two employees, as the Vice Chairman said, Mr. Brown and Mr. Fire Chief Moore. We're really here to make them the best they can be. So that's kind of the eye that I use, but definitely I would encourage you to speak about that, and I'm here to help. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Jung, and I couldn't agree more with your comments, and look, constructive criticism is exactly what we're trying to accomplish, if there is constructive criticism to be had. The other thing, and I'm happy to add or subtract or do whatever the commission likes, and that's why we bring it forward in this forum. The only thing I would recommend is that very often, this is a fairly robust list. You've got almost 20, 30, 31 people on the list. Very often, we don't get all the surveys back in a timely manner. I mean, many of these people have very busy schedules, and they're fire chiefs or managers or whatnot, and to sit down and do a fairly robust review of somebody can take time. And so we've tried to be as efficient as possible so that we can get this done, as the commissioner said, and because it's contractual. But at the same time, we want to make sure that we are providing the chief the best information for his growth. So if you feel there's somebody you would like to add, I'm happy to talk with you offline on that, and we can meet with the chief as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't have anyone in particular. I was just curious, just following up, just asking some questions, being the new person on the board.
Yeah, appreciate that. I mean, and all good comments, and so, and like I said, and the questions are here too. We have also allowed the questions for the survey have been posted in the agenda, if there's any other thing that needs to be added to that. All right, is there any public comment signed in on this item?
Seeing done.
All right, I have no public comment. Is there any further discussion by any of the commissioners? If there is no further discussion, I will look for a motion.
So moved.
All right, I have a motion by Vice Chair Hartung. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Jung. So I have a motion by the Vice Chairman, second by Commissioner Jung. Call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Please affirm your votes on your screens.
Just a minute. Stop.
Here we go. There you go.
Sorry about that.
Motion carries unanimously with all commissioners voting. Thank you very much. All right, Chief, this is item 13. This is legislative review. Sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll ask Chief Way to come to the podium if I may. There's two bills that I think are very, very important, SB 113 and AB 100. The board may recall the Perry fire in Palomino Valley a number of years where a suspect was charged with firing fireworks, which caused the fire, which destroyed a substantial amount of acreage and structures. At the end of the day, he was acquitted because of the word of how we define malicious, that the state could not prove that he did so maliciously. So he was not penalized under the law, as far as I understand. And so all the fire chiefs in the region believe that there needs to be an amendment to the way that malicious is defined. And I'll let Chief Way speak to that. And we can have more discussions on the others if you so desire. But all four of these pieces of legislation, staff recommends for support.
Perfect. Chief Way, thank you.
Good morning. Senate Bill 113 is to define malicious so that it lessens the burden of proof. As Chief was noting, this did regard around the Perry fire, and the Nevada Supreme Court was defining malicious as proving evil intent. And so what this does is change that and give a better definition of malicious that lessens that burden. And we do support this. We did make comment on this in committee that we also would like to see that the least penalty be a gross misdemeanor rather than a misdemeanor as the legislation is currently proposed. Another one is a Senate bill, or Assembly Bill 86, and that's another one that's extremely helpful. It goes across several different Nevada revised statutes and deletes the term which threatens human life, again lessening the burden of proof, and that is on fee recovery for, incidents involving gross negligence.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to just say something about AB 100 and that it embeds the Wildfire Protection Plan in state statute. If not for the Wildfire Protection Plan, I think this district would be bankrupt, and probably the county too, based on the number of fires that we had last year and the costs associated with that. Wildfire Protection Plan is a one-time fee, annual fee that the district and the county pay that pays for the large portion of the costs of fighting a fire by the state's fund. So it's essentially an insurance policy. It's always been a program and not embedded in state statute. We think that that's very, very important. Northern Nevada Fire Chiefs Association has supported this, and we certainly recommend its approval.
Okay.
Support.
So support for AB 100, and then we have AB 96.
And there's more out there, but these are the ones that we can get.
These are the ones we want
We
today.
can get on the agenda.
Okay. And then AB 96, this is but can you just give us a brief update for the board on the record so that why we would be supporting this?
This is establishes a Commission for Emergency Response Employees' Mental Health. And although the district has a robust peer support services, it still establishes a commission that helps create the awareness and support. I would assume that this is going to support the local peer support agencies, whether they're law enforcement, whether they're fire. So there's an umbrella at the state level that would filter down towards each agency's peer support program.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And, Derek Reed, who has been a phenomenal advocate and participant, innovator, you name it, of this program, and has been part of this since the very start. I'm sure will be testifying in its support down there because of your experience and your understanding of this process. And Mr. Reed is with us here in the chambers this morning. So are there any questions for the chief or staff in regards to any of these items? Vice Chairman.
Yeah, not a question, Mr. Chairman, but yeah, AB 96, I can't imagine why we wouldn't support something of this nature. It's just so very important. It's been one of those things that, going back, my own family, in World War II, and they called it shell-shocked. And there was literally very little to no recognition of those kinds of issues, and we're now understanding what an important role this plays. And so, I again, can't imagine why we wouldn't highly support this.
Okay. So as the agenda is posted today, we are asking for support of SB 113, AB 100, AB 96, and AB 86. As the chief pointed out, there are many other bills that are fire service related and many BDRs that have yet to be filed in this legislative session, but we have staff looking at those and we're working on those day to day. Any further comments from any of the commissioners? We do need a formalized motion, sir, to move forward with support of these on behalf of the Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District.
I move to direct staff to support AB 113, AB 100, AB 96, and AB 86 on behalf of the Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District.
Okay, I have a motion from Commissioner Hill, second from Vice Chair Hartung. Any further public comment? Seeing no public comment. I will bring it back to the board. Seeing no further discussion, call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Please affirm your vote on the screen. Thank you very much for your support. This is always good. Derek, good luck down in Carson, buddy. Or, I mean, via Zoom, so whatever works. All right, Chief. That concludes all of our work for today. We are on to item 14. Is there any need for a closed session today or regarding the labor issues?
No, sir.
All right, seeing no need for item 14, we'll move 14 on to item 15, Fire Chiefs and Commissioners' announcements.
No additional announcements, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioners, anything you'd like to add? Going once, twice. Vice Chairman.
Chief, when you bring back the item on auto and mutual aid, can you add just a brief, maybe even history of the way TM is funded as a line item on the unincorporated tax bills and how that was implemented originally?
Yes.
Very important.
Yeah, I think that's, I mean, when you bring that item back, Chief, it definitely needs to be robust in regards to history, potential implications going forward. Commissioner Jung has been, and I both have talked about this a number of times. I think every commissioner, actually, for that matter, about how annexation is impactful to these types of services and what that looks like. But I think this is a start in the right direction to have that conversation or a continuance of that conversation. So thank you, Chief. Do appreciate that. Any further discussions from any of the commissioners? Commissioner Jung?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would say, Mr. Fire Chief, when you prepare that report, please also include how the unincorporated citizens asked us to raise their fire tax rate and actually convince the board to go to the higher level rather than the moderate level. Because that says a lot, too, when it comes to regionalization, those sort of things. We have a set budget that the taxpayers asked to raise. It's not general funded at all, and therefore it does not exist on the vagaries of the economy and what this board as a county commission decides are their priorities, because that's what the real issue why we didn't sign, we broke the interlocal. So some sort of nod to that too would be helpful for the community to understand. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner Jung. All right. We will close Commissioner and Chief's announcements. We're on to 16, our final public comment. Madam Clerk, do we have any public comments signed in?
I'm not seeing any.
Anybody on Zoom? Going once, twice, three, sold. Everybody, we are adjourned. Thanks very much for coming today.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.